Good morning, students. My name is VP Singh, and today we are going to discuss the second part of American Revolution. In the previous part, we discussed about the causes of American Revolution, the situation of America before the revolution, and few terms such as Native Americans and colonists. Today, we are going to discuss the course of event in revolution. So let's begin with this. In 1754, a war was started in Northern America, and that is called Seven-Year War. This war was started in 1754 and terminated in 1763. Although 54 to 63 is 9 years, but still this is called 7-year war because most of the fighting events started in 56. Remember this. So this war was started actually in 56 and terminated in 63. So this war is called 7-year war. This war was fought between Britain and France. These were the most important colonial powers of Europe, and in the last lecture we also discussed this, that Spain, Britain and France, these were the three powers which settled in Northern America. So now this war was fought in between Britain and France over the territories in America. And not only in America, when this war was started, they both were colonial power with colonies all around the world. It soon spread to the 5 continents. I mentioned over here 5 continents from the 7. The remaining 2 continents were, first one was Europe and the second one was Antarctica. Okay. In India, this war was manifested in the Third Carnatic War. And while you will read the modern history of India, you have to link both of them. Now, France was defeated in this war and he lost most of his territory in America. A Treaty of Paris was signed in 63 and then this war was ended. All the territory in the east of Mississippi River, there is a river named Mississippi. The entire part in the east side of Mississippi River was acquired by British Army. So basically, the France rule in Northern America was almost over. They were nowhere in power now. Only the 2 powers were there. The first one were British and the second one were Spanish. Earlier the British colonies had threat from France because they could attack them. Here, as I mentioned, that there is an mountain range, Appalachian mountain range, which was a natural boundary in between the British and French colonies. But still, the British colonies had threat that French colonies may attack anytime. The French colonies may attack anytime on them. So this time, when they defeated to the France in 7-year war, the threat of attack on them was gone. Due to the 7-year war, Britain went into heavy debt. Look in this map. It is the Mississippi River. So western part was remained under the power of Spanish. The eastern part was acquired by the Britishers, and this part, the dark brown part, that was already the part of British Crown. So after this war, what happened? The Britishers went into heavy debt. The first important thing was French threat to colonies was gone. Second, British went into heavy debt. Their governments was paying heavy interest because of this debt. Due to the 7-year war, the national debt of Britain almost doubled. To make their financial situation a bit better, they planned to tax the colonists. Why the colonists only? Because they thought that this war would benefit to the colonists only. They thought that this war will definitely benefit to the colonists because they will get more land and resources and also the security. So they mentioned this thing clearly that we are taxing you heavy just because this war was just for you. Only you will be benefited by this war. So colonists also thought that it's okay, we will pay the taxes if we will get those lands or resources and security was the third important purpose. But colonies were forbidden to settle in newly acquired lands. Government refused them or government denied to support them to settle down in those areas. Why? What was the reason? The reason because some of the Native American tribes had supported Britain in Seven-Year War and they were promised that no one will settle down over there, so they did not allow the colonists to settle in those areas. So this concession given to the Native Americans was not very much welcomed by the colonists. The colonists were very angry that they were thinking that we will go and expand quickly, and on the other hand they were being taxed more. So now you can say that this was a double shock for them. You cannot expand and you will be taxed more. So around the time this war, a new king came to the throne of England, King George III. In the age of 22 years, he became the king in 1760 and ruled for almost 60 years. It is said that this king was having some kind of issues, like he thought that the American Revolution was his personal insult. He took it personally. He thought that it is a personal insult of the king. The people are revolting against his rule, so it should be put down at any cost. And this was the main reason that this thing initiated this revolution. Now we will discuss the unpopular act that were imposed by the British government, by the British Parliament after the Seven-Year War. So as I told you, they wanted money, they were in debt, British government was in huge debt, so they started imposing different taxes onto the colonies. So the first act was the Sugar Act 1764. Okay, this act said that the sugar will be exported to the Britain or to the England only. Sugar to be exported only to England. This act came in 1764 and this is the most important act, remember? This is the most important act, remember? So sugar was a big produced or the largest commodity of America. As I told you, sugar, tobacco, indigo. So this was a controversial act. This was very unpopular. And then came the Quartering Act of 1764. It said that whatever it is, if the British soldiers are there in America, the people living in the colonies, they will provide them lodging. That means this act said that pay for the English soldiers stationed in America, provide them lodging if they required. Lodging means home. If the soldiers required somewhere to stay, there they have to let them stay in their house or their own home. And if they ask for, they also have to provide money for the lodging of the soldiers. So basically, whatever army, the British army stationed in America, it has to be paid by the people living in America, even though the army is not doing them anything with them, but still they have to pay them. They have to pay for the salaries and also provide lodging to them. This was very controversial because imagine hundreds of soldiers coming to your area and they are saying that we want to stay, we want a place to stay, and you have to allow them. Even if you don't want, you have to allow them into your homes to sleep, to eat food. This was quite controversial and unpopular Quartering Act of 1764. Then came the Stamp Act of 1765. This act simply said, as I mentioned over here in this image also, this was a stamp actually. So it is called the Stamp Act 1765. So this is called Stamp Act 1765. It says that all legal documents or printed documents, just like newspapers or others, needed to be stamped. Now onwards, all the legal documents like will or any kind of property transfer, all the newspapers, Basically anything that is printed will be required to have a stamp on it. Whatever, all the amount was very less, but if you come to think of it printing hundreds of or 100,000 newspapers copies, amount will be quite big for a person who is running the newspaper. And also the legal documents of lawyers, all the legal documents of lawyers, this will be a huge cost. So this affected the lawyers and the journalists and also the educated people. Come to think of it, these are the last set of people in the world that you want angry: lawyers who know the law and the journalists who can reach to the people by their writings, by newspapers. So these were very angry and protests started. They said that no taxation without representation. Look, I mentioned over here, this slogan was mentioned: no taxes without representation. Actually, these are the people, they are reading those acts which were passed, and they are discussing that, wow, what is this happening, what they are doing. We will not pay any kind of tax without representation. As I mentioned in the last lecture also, that there was no representation provided them into British Parliament to the colonists. So they were demanding since that time, and when these act came, they now they were pretty much sure that we will not pay any kind of tax without any representation. And even somewhere I mentioned over here that instead of using that stamp, they started using this stamp, a stamp having bones and skull, a photograph of people reading the Stamp Act, and then came, this is the stamp which I mentioned in this lecture. The American newspapers started printing as a symbol of bones and skulls on the newspaper. They said that we will not print this stamp. Which stamp? This stamp. They said that we will not print this stamp. Instead, we will print this stamp. We are going to print this stamp because it is like death nail for us. Whatever the taxes you are asking to pay, that is kind of death nail for us. So around the same time, an organization was formed, was called Son of Liberty or the Sons of Liberty. This was formed in 1765. As in the first lecture also, I mentioned a name, Samuel Adams. Okay, here it is, Mr. Samuel Adams. It was led by Samuel Adams and advocated use to violence, educated boycott of British goods, and he said that trade with Britain should be stopped. Okay, trade with Britain should be, it is here, stopped. So he formed a group, Sons of Liberty, in 1765 and advocated use of violence, boycott of British goods, and trade with Britain should be stopped. These correspondents were the workers of Sons of Liberty, and they had a crucial link in between the American Revolution and this Sons of Liberty. Earlier in the first lecture, I mentioned that they were just saying that they were just asking for the representation. But this person, Samuel Adams, and its group Sons of Liberty, this advocated the use of violence. This provide, or he provide the way of boycott. It is just as like Asahayog Andolan in India. They wanted these taxes removed. They did not want independence. They did not want any kind of self-rule, home rule. But this guy started that this British Empire has gone too far and they are imposing taxes on us which are not necessary. And they are wrong for us. This is against our rights, and in that age of enlightenment, other people also joined him. And they started thinking that yes, this is against our natural rights. We should not be taxed. We should not be taxed if it is not helping us, if the money is not coming back to our society. These Sons of Liberty and Samuel Adams, they found committee of correspondence which were crucial link in the American War of Independence. These committee of correspondence, they were tasked with communicating with each other. So they wrote letters to each other in all these 13 colonies. So there are lot of towns, and you must realize the colonies are not small, they were very big, they are large geographical areas. So you need very efficient communication between them. So this coordinate activity, in one colony you are protesting British goods, in another you are parting with them. So this cannot go in, so they needs to be a unified chain of command. So this committee of correspondence, this create this chain. So this was provided by the committee of correspondence. Later on, these committees only lead the formation of colonial congress, and these committees led to the formation of Continental Congress. They were part of the fighting with the Continental Army. In 1766, the Act of Declaratory was announced, and with this, the Stamp Act was repealed because there was so much protest against the Stamp Act. It was repealed, but at the same time, the Parliament said that the King and the British Parliament have all the powers to make laws and tax the colonies in future. Same time, like they removed this act, but still they said that the King and British Parliament have all the powers to make law and taxes the colonies in the future. What they were protesting, that we need some kind of representation, then only we can allow you to tax us. But still, British Parliament were clear that the King and British Parliament have all the powers. We are providing you representation in Parliament or not. That is not the issue, but still we have the powers. So basically, they said that because you are angry, we will remove one act, the Stamp Act, which you do not like, but we will tax you in the future. So the American people were like that it is going on. One, we are telling that we do not want to be taxed unnecessarily, and you are telling that in future you will tax us. How is this just? This is unjust. Then we have the Townshend Act of 1764. Charles Townshend was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. According to this, three things were done. Firstly, New York's legislature was suspended because they failed to implement that Stamp Act. So they suspended the New York's legislature because they had failed to honor the Quartering Act also, and failed to provide lodging to the soldiers. Second, it taxed the essential goods like tea, paper, glass, lead, and paint, all the ingredients to build a house, the necessary things. Tea was consumed by everyone in the British society as well as American society. It was bought from India by the East India Company, and it was very popular. It is a commodity that is consumed many times and by everyone. So it is like sugar or wheat. You can say that this is a part of daily routine. It was very common for everyone. It was very common. Everyone have to buy it. So if you tax this, everyone will suffer. Paper, glass, lead, and paint, these are all important to build a house, that it will become costly to build a house if you tax these items. The British authorities were now empowered to search any building, any house, or any ship in American colonies. Anything without warrant. This is also very unpopular, and British officers can barge into your house without a warrant or without any proper reason. So again, protests started against the Townshend Act, and while these protests were going, a Boston Massacre happened in 1770. What is Boston Massacre? What happened was, people were protesting against the British officers in Boston, and the British soldiers opened fire. 5 protesters were killed. This protest respected so much for calling it a massacre, but still it is very important because it was publicized heavily by the efforts of patriots like Paul Revere and Samuel Adams. The same Samuel Adams, the founder of Sons of Liberty. So they used as a propaganda printed photograph like this. Look at this. They are firing openly, and these are the dead peoples. So they printed it with the photographs. With this painting was used in circulated widely by Paul Revere, and this became like Jallianwala Bagh tragedy in India. It was it has such as importance, but although in India thousands were people killed, here only 5 protesters were killed, but it did the same thing what the Jallianwala Bagh did in India. The Boston Massacre turned the public opinion against the Crown rule and its policies. Earlier, people were angry with the taxes, but they were not completely against the British rule. They were not against the British king. They never used to curse them. But now, slowly, after the Boston Massacre, things changed. People started thinking that no, there is something wrong with British rules. So the main important thing was these were the people, Paul Revere and Samuel Adams were the people who changed the policies of people against the crown. People started thinking that no, there is something wrong with the British rule. We should not pay taxes to them. We should do something about it. And the patriots like Paul Revere and Samuel Adams, they have some points like they mentioned in front of those peoples with the help of these kind of images. So we came to the Tea Act of 1773. In 1772, new British Prime Minister Lord North announced that all those earlier taxes on lead, glass, it will be removed. Only the tea will be taxed because it was benefiting East India Company. So they taxed it. East India Company had huge reserve of tea lying in their warehouses in London, and they wanted to get rid of it. And so they wanted to sell it in America. Okay. So the main important thing was Act came in 1773. Lord North was Prime Minister of Britain at that time who imposed this, removed all the taxes except on tea, mainly to benefit East India Company. Again, the protesters refused to follow this act. They refused to purchase tea from East India Company in America, and also they said that ship laden with tea cargo will not be allowed in America. But at the same time, the governor of Massachusetts, Mr. Hutchinson, he declared that he will have ship unloaded in Boston Harbor. He said that my ports are open for them. I will ensure that they are safely unloaded in Boston Harbor in my city. When these ships came into the harbor, the same Samuel Adams, he led the party of men and they all dressed up as Native Americans. They boarded those ships and they threw all the cargo. Look at here. They threw all the cargo containing the tea from East India Company into the harbor or into the sea. This is called the Boston Tea Party. It is not just like the party in today's century, 21st century, but later on it was called as the Boston Tea Party. Look at here. Someone from these was Samuel Adams. Okay. So group led by Samuel Adams boarded the ship of East India Company and dumped tea worth rupees 10,000 pounds in the water. Look, 10,000 pound does not look big at this time, but at that time it was huge. This event happened on 16 December 1773. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament passed Intolerable Act in 1774. They passed this act, and what were they mentioned in this act? The first thing, public meeting in town hall was banned. They said that you cannot discuss anything against the empire. All the meetings of Sons of Liberty are not allowed, And the second thing was the Boston port was completely closed until compensation is given by the colonists for the dumped tea of East India Company. They said that pay the compensation and then only the Boston port will open. Again, a Quebec Act was passed. They extended the boundaries of British ruled Quebec. Like it is about the Canada. It was not popular act at that time because this did not work in America. Already there were lots of problems. So Quebec Act was not passed. In response of this, the Patriots started training the militias of looming fighting with Britishers. They were getting ready, that they were very much sure that now the war is going to happen. In such an atmosphere, the first Continental Congress was called in September 1774. The Congress simply means a meeting of representatives of all 13 colonies. Remember, in the first Continental Congress, this is not important, but you can remember this thing. In the first Continental Congress, only the representatives of 12 colonies participated. All 13 colonies participated in the second Continental Congress. First semblance, this was the first semblance of an American government. I'm saying the semblance. This was not American government. This is just an first semblance of it. This we can say that this was the shadow of American government on which the American government was formed in the future. He decided to boycott British goods and increase use of domestically produced goods. It was Swadeshi Andolan. It was kind of Swadeshi Andolan. So they mentioned this thing and boycott the British goods. They stopped trading with the Britain, and entire 12 colonies stopped trading with Britain. After the first Congress, hostilities break out. The American Revolutionary War begins in 1775. By April 1775, fight was started at Lexington and Concord. The Continental Army or the American Army was led by General George Washington. Remember this name? General George Washington, very famous person. He became the first president of United States. King George III was petitioned in July by the Congress to stop oppressive laws and avoid full-blown war. Even the Continental Congress does not want this war, so they said that King George III that we should stop this war, and for this what you have to do is stop these oppressive laws. But he declared that the Congress as an traitors. So this was the last gate which was closed in between the King George III or the British rule and the colonies. This was the last gate or the window which was remained open to talk, was closed by King George III. He said that you are trying to use up the power that has been bestowed on the British Parliament and British monarch, and I will not let this happen. So as I told you earlier, the king took it personally that the revolution was against him, and he said completely no to any kind of conciliation. Many colonists, rich traders in cities benefiting from trade policies, still favored British rule. They were called loyalists. I mentioned this in first lecture. In early 1775, there was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine. This is the same name which I mentioned in the Thinkers. A pamphlet written by Thomas Paine named Common Sense. Initially, when it was written anonymously. No one knew that it was mentioned or it was written by Thomas Paine. Later on, we came to find that it was spreaded by Thomas Paine. This was 48-page pamphlet and it advocated the independence. So, he was talking about independence. Remember, the first Continental Congress had not demanded independence. They had just boycotted British goods, stopped trading with Britain, they promoted the use of domestic production, so and so on those things. But Thomas Paine, he wrote that we need independence. He wrote, it is very simple. He wrote this in a very simple language that would be understood by everyone, and he was very much persuasive. Use persuasive arguments and reasons. So, this has been the most widely circulated book of all time, even till today. Such, this was impacted the common sense that people suddenly thought that yes, independence is what we want. And by this, by the time the second Congress was convened, they declared that we will get independence and they started fighting for it. By early 1776, in all 13 colonies, patriots had overthrown their existing governments, closing courts and driving away British officials. They had elected legislature and new constitutions were drawn up. And they declared themselves as state. They said that we are state. We are states now, not colonies. The Second Continental Congress was convened in 1766 on 4th of July. They adopted they adopted the Declaration of Independence, which was written by Thomas Jefferson. This date today is celebrated as the Independence Day of USA. The Second Continental Congress oversaw the war efforts. Actually, this Second Congress acted as the government of the day. In this war, Americans or the colonials were supported by the French Empire. And this also almost bankrupted to the French Empire. Spain and Netherlands also supported to the Americans. Look, I mentioned over here the Second Continental Congress in 1776 on 4th of July. The Declaration of Independence was adopted by the Americans at Philadelphia. Thomas Jefferson was that person who wrote this declaration. What was in that declaration? They mentioned that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equally, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Remember, life, liberty, and the third one was property, but Thomas Jefferson changed it with pursuit of happiness. The Second Congress oversaw the war effort, and the patriots were soon supported by the French Empire, which nearly bankrupted itself, supporting the Americans. Spain and Netherlands also supported them. The war ended in October 1781 when General Cornwallis, Mr. Cornwallis is here, when General Cornwallis, remember the name, Mr. General Cornwallis came into India in 1781, surrendered at Yorktown. A Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. American independence recognized by Great Britain. Around 100,000 soldiers died in this fight, but not because of war. Mostly died due to the disease like cholera, Haja, and those kind of things. Significance of these events: the independence of USA was nationalism, a new kind of nationalism. A new type of state was formed which was mass based, not leader based, and it is called a republic. Anti-imperialist nation was formed, a blueprint of uniting people for a cause. Idea of enlightenment found real world application in this. As I mentioned in the last lecture also, that ideas of enlightenment were in the books before this event, but this event found a real world for them. No American is inherently superior to any other American. Like in European society, if you are birth in a higher class society, you will get the superiority. But in America, they said no one is superior than the other American. It inspired, led to the other revolutions, especially the French and Latin American revolutions also. British Empire changed its policy over the world as they passed Pitt's India Act in 1784 and Cornwallis Reform in India. So this was American Revolution. I mentioned all the things in this. For any kind of query and questions, you can contact to me. Till the next lecture. Thank you very much.